Marcus Hale never imagined that saying yes to a stranger would unravel everything he thought he knew about survival, connection, and what it means to truly see another person. At 32, broke and exhausted, he was just trying to make it through another day in a Chicago cafe when a woman on crutches asked to share his table. She was a billionaire. He was barely scraping by. She was polished, composed, untouchable. He was drowning in bills and single fatherhood. But beneath her wealth and his struggle, something unexpected began to grow, something that would change both their lives in ways neither could predict. Before we begin, please hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's dive in. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and someone's overly sweet perfume. Marcus sat in the corner booth, the one with the cracked vinyl seat that nobody wanted, staring at his phone screen like it might suddenly produce answers. It didn't. It never did. The notifications were the same as yesterday. Past due. Final notice. Account suspended. He'd stopped opening them 3 days ago. What was the point? The numbers didn't change just because you ignored them, but at least you could pretend for a few more hours that the walls weren't closing in. His coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago. He should have left by now. The waitress kept glancing over with that look that said, order something else or get out. But where would he go? Back to the apartment where the landlord's note was still taped to the door? Back to the pile of medical bills that kept growing even though Jamie's asthma hadn't gotten worse in months? He pressed his palms against his eyes until he saw stars. Excuse me? The voice was quiet, almost apologetic. Marcus looked up. A woman stood beside his table, mid-30s maybe. Dark hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless but probably wasn't. Gray coat that looked expensive even to someone who knew nothing about expensive things. And crutches. Forearm crutches, the kind that wrapped around your arms instead of tucking under your armpits. I'm sorry to bother you, she said, and her voice had this strange quality to it, like she was used to not being heard even when she spoke clearly. Every other table is taken. Would you mind if I sat here? Marcus glanced around the cafe. She was right. Every seat was filled with the usual Monday morning crowd. Freelancers with laptops, students with textbooks, people who had nowhere better to be at 10 a.m. on a weekday. Yeah, sure. He started to gather his things. The newspaper he wasn't reading, his phone, the empty sugar packets he'd been folding into tiny squares. But she was already maneuvering into the seat across from him with a practiced efficiency that made it clear she'd done this 1,000 times before. Thank you, she said, settling the crutches against the wall. I appreciate it. Marcus nodded, planning to put his earbuds in and disappear into his phone for the next however long, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she'd said thank you, like she really meant it, like it cost her something to ask. Or maybe it was the way two women at the next table were staring, not even trying to hide it, their voices dropping to whispers. The woman didn't seem to notice. Or if she did, she didn't let it show. A waitress appeared almost immediately. What can I get you, ma'am? Just a tea, please. Earl Grey, if you have it. We do. The waitress smiled at her in a way she hadn't smiled at Marcus all morning. Anything else? No, that's all. Thank you. When the waitress left, the woman pulled out a leather notebook, the kind with actual paper, not a tablet, and a pen. She opened it to a page already half filled with handwriting too small for Marcus to read from across the table. He should have looked away, should have minded his own business. But there was something about the way she held that pen, the way her hand moved across the page in smooth, decisive strokes that felt oddly mesmerizing. I can feel you watching. Marcus's face went hot. Sorry, I wasn't. It's fine. She glanced up, and for the first time he really saw her eyes. Dark brown, tired, but not in the way his were tired. Most people stare, you're just quieter about it. He didn't know what to say to that. I'm Victoria, she said. Marcus. She nodded once, then went back to writing. But something about the exchange felt unfinished, like there was supposed to be more, but neither of them knew what. The tea arrived. Victoria wrapped both hands around the cup like she was cold, even though the cafe was overheated and stuffy. Do you come here often? She asked. It was such a cliché line that Marcus almost laughed, but she said it like she genuinely wanted to know, not like she was trying to pick him up. Most days, he admitted, It's cheaper than paying for heating at home. He regretted it the second it came out of his mouth. You weren't supposed to admit things like that. Not to strangers. Not to anyone, really. But Victoria just nodded, like it made perfect sense. I've been coming here for 2 weeks, she said. Same time every morning. I like that it's loud. Easier to think when there's noise. Yeah? My apartment's too quiet. All I hear is my own thoughts, and they're not great company lately. Marcus stared at her. People didn't just say things like that. Not in Chicago. Not in cafes where everyone was pretending their lives were fine and their lattes were the most important thing happening that day. I know what you mean, he said. And he did. God, he did. They sat in silence for a while after that. Not an awkward silence, just silence. The kind that didn't demand anything from you. Victoria drank her tea. Marcus checked his phone and found 3 new emails he couldn't afford to read. Outside the window, the city moved on like it always did. Buses and taxis, and people who all looked like they knew where they were going. Do you have kids? Victoria asked suddenly. Marcus looked up. 1. A daughter. Jamie. She's 8. That's a good age. Is it? Victoria smiled faintly. I don't know. I've never had kids. But 8 seems better than 16. Fair point. What's she like? No one ever asked him that. They asked how's she doing, or is she in school, or who watches her when you're working. Questions that were really just polite ways of asking if he was failing as a parent. But no one asked what she was like. She's stubborn, Marcus said. Scarily smart. Loves dinosaurs even though all her friends are into princesses now. She corrects my grammar when I'm tired. Victoria laughed. Actually laughed. It changed her whole face. She sounds wonderful. She is. Marcus hesitated. She's the only thing I haven't completely screwed up. The smile faded from Victoria's face, but not in a judgmental way. More like she understood something she hadn't understood a moment before. I doubt that's true, she said quietly. You don't know me. No. But I know that look. Marcus frowned. What look? The one that says you're convinced you're failing at everything, so you might as well stop trying. It felt like being punched in the chest. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, but there was no heat in it. Maybe not. Victoria took another sip of tea. But I know what it's like to wake up every day and feel like you're disappointing everyone, including yourself. She said it so simply, like it was just a fact, not a confession. Marcus wanted to ask what someone like her, someone who could afford a coat like that, who carried herself like she'd never had to worry about whether the lights would stay on, could possibly have to feel disappointed about. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the crutches leaning against the wall, or the way her hand shook just slightly when she set down her cup. I should go, Victoria said abruptly. She reached for her crutches, fitting them onto her forearms with practiced movements. You just got here. I know, but I have a meeting at 11 and traffic's going to be terrible. Marcus watched her stand. She moved carefully, but not slowly. There was a grace to it that felt hard-won. It was nice to meet you, Marcus. You too. She made it 3 steps before turning back. Will you be here tomorrow? The question caught him off guard. Probably. I don't have anywhere else to be. Victoria smiled. Not a polite smile, a real one. Good, me neither. And then she was gone, navigating through the crowded cafe with the kind of quiet determination that made people move out of her way without realizing they were doing it. Marcus sat there for another 10 minutes, staring at the spot where she'd been sitting. He couldn't explain it, but something had shifted. Not in any big dramatic way, just shifted. For the first time in months, he didn't feel quite so alone. The next morning, Marcus almost didn't go back to the cafe. Jamie had woken up wheezing at 3 a.m., and he'd spent the rest of the night sitting on the edge of her bed with the nebulizer running, watching her chest rise and fall, praying it wouldn't get worse. By the time the sun came up, she was breathing easier, and he was exhausted in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. But he'd promised to take her to school, and she'd insisted on wearing her favorite dinosaur shirt, even though it was in the laundry, and by the time he'd negotiated her into something else and gotten her out the door and onto the bus, it was already 9:30. The cafe was on the way home, or at least close enough that he could justify the detour. Victoria was already there. Same table, same gray coat, same leather notebook open in front of her. Marcus hesitated in the doorway. He could leave. She probably wouldn't even notice. But even as he thought it, she looked up and saw him. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture relaxed. He walked over. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, echoing her words from yesterday. "Please." He dropped into the seat across from her, and it felt strangely natural, like he'd been sitting in this exact spot every morning for years instead of just once. "How's your daughter?" Victoria asked. Marcus blinked. "How did you— You said she corrects your grammar. That's not the kind of detail you forget about someone you just met." He didn't know what to do with that, with someone paying that kind of attention. "She's okay. Had a rough night, but she's tough." "Like her dad, I'm guessing." Marcus let out a short laugh. "I'm not tough. I'm just stubborn." "Same thing, usually." The waitress came by and Marcus ordered another coffee he couldn't afford, because leaving after 2 minutes felt weird, and sitting there without ordering anything felt weirder. "What are you writing?" he asked, nodding at the notebook. Victoria glanced down like she'd forgotten it was there. "Notes, ideas, things I need to remember." "For work?" She hesitated. "Not exactly. More like things I want to do someday." "Like a bucket list?" "Something like that?" She said it lightly, but there was weight behind it. Marcus recognized that weight. He carried it around himself most days. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure." "Why did you really sit with me yesterday? The cafe wasn't that crowded. There were other tables." Victoria closed her notebook carefully, her fingers smoothing over the leather cover. "Because you looked like someone who wouldn't ask questions." "I'm asking questions right now." "Different questions." She met his eyes. "Most people, when they see me, they either stare or they try too hard not to stare. Or they ask what happened, like it's their business. You didn't do any of that." "Should I have?" "No?" She shook her head. "It was nice, being just a person, not a thing people need to have an opinion about." Marcus understood that more than he wanted to admit. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm not much better. People look at me like I'm a cautionary tale, the guy who couldn't keep it together." "Did something happen?" It was a careful question, the kind that gave him room to answer or not answer. "My wife left 2 years ago." The words came out flat, factual. Said she didn't sign up for this, for struggling, for a kid with medical issues, for a husband who couldn't figure out how to make enough money to fix any of it. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." She was probably right. Victoria frowned. That's a terrible thing to believe about yourself. Doesn't make it less true. Doesn't make it true at all. They stared at each other across the table, and Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. Not painfully, more like a door he'd kept locked for too long finally giving way. "What about you?" he asked. "What's your thing? The thing that makes people look at you like you're a cautionary tale?" Victoria's expression shifted. Not closing off, exactly. More like she was deciding how much to say. "I lost part of my leg in a car accident 3 years ago," she said finally. "Just below the knee. I have a prosthetic, but some days it doesn't fit right. Or the pain's too bad, or I just can't deal with it. So I use the crutches. That must be hard." "It is." She said it simply. "But the hardest part isn't the leg. It's the way people react. Like I'm either tragic or inspirational, and there's no in between. Like I can't just be a woman having a cup of tea in a cafe." Marcus nodded slowly. "People are terrible at just letting other people exist." "Yes?" Victoria smiled faintly. "Exactly that." The coffee arrived. Marcus wrapped his hands around the cup the same way Victoria had with her tea yesterday, letting the heat seep into his palms. "So what's in the notebook?" he asked. "The things you want to do someday?" Victoria hesitated, then opened it again. She didn't turn it around to show him, but she looked at whatever was written there like it mattered. "I want to build something," she said. "A place. A sanctuary, I guess. For people with disabilities, somewhere they can just be. Without stares or pity or people treating them like they're broken." "That's a good dream." "It's an expensive dream." She closed the notebook. "And I don't know if I'm brave enough to actually do it." "Why not?" "Because what if I fail? What if I build it and no one comes, or it doesn't help anyone, or I screw it up the way I've screwed up everything else. Marcus set down his coffee. You said yesterday that you know that look, he said. The one that says you're failing at everything. You were right. I do have that look. But you know what? So do you. Victoria blinked. And maybe we're both wrong, Marcus continued. Maybe we're not failing. Maybe we're just trying to figure it out, like everyone else. For a long moment, Victoria didn't say anything. Then she smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Maybe, she said. They sat there for another hour talking about nothing important. Jamie's dinosaur obsession, the terrible coffee, the woman at the next table who was having an extremely loud phone conversation about her ex-boyfriend, the weather, which was gray and miserable, but at least not snowing yet. It was the most normal conversation Marcus had had in months. When Victoria finally stood to leave, gathering her crutches and her notebook, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Disappointment that it was ending. Same time tomorrow? She asked. Yeah, Marcus said, same time. And for the first time in 2 years, he actually looked forward to tomorrow. By the end of the week, it had become a routine. Every morning at 9:30, Marcus walked into the cafe, and Victoria was already there. Same table, same tea, same notebook. And every morning, they talked. Not about anything profound, not about their problems or their pasts or the things that kept them up at night. Just talked. About the news. About the cafe's terrible muffins. About the books Victoria was reading and the way Jamie had announced at breakfast that she wanted to be a paleontologist when she grew up. It was easy. Easier than anything had been in a long time. On Thursday, Marcus brought Jamie with him. He hadn't planned to, but his usual sitter had canceled last minute, and school was closed for some teacher planning day, and he couldn't afford to miss his morning at the cafe. Not anymore. Is she going to be here? Jamie asked as they walked through the door. Who? The lady you keep talking about. Marcus stopped. I don't keep talking about her. Jamie gave him a look that was far too knowing for an 8-year-old. You mentioned her 3 times yesterday, Dad. That's not... But Victoria was waving at them from the corner table, and Jamie was already tugging him forward. Hi, Jamie said, with the absolute confidence of a child who'd never learned to be nervous around strangers. I'm Jamie. Are you Victoria? Victoria's expression transformed. The careful, guarded look she usually wore softened into something genuine. I am. It's nice to meet you, Jamie. Your dad's told me a lot about you. He told me about you, too. You have crutches. Jamie, Marcus started, but Victoria shook her head slightly. I do, she said to Jamie. Do they bother you? No. My friend Tyler has a wheelchair. He says people ask stupid questions all the time. Tyler's right, they do. Dad says I'm not supposed to ask stupid questions, but I was wondering, can I see your notebook? Victoria blinked, then laughed. Actually laughed. Sure. She slid the notebook across the table. Jamie opened it carefully, like it was something precious, and studied the pages with the same intensity she brought to her dinosaur books. What's this? She pointed to something Marcus couldn't see. That's a sketch of a building I want to design someday. Why do you want to design a building? Because I think people need more places where they can feel safe. Jamie considered this seriously. Like a treehouse. Sort of, but bigger. Cool. Jamie closed the notebook and pushed it back across the table. Can I have hot chocolate? Marcus ordered her the hot chocolate, and they spent the next hour in the cafe while Jamie drew dinosaurs on napkins, and Victoria asked her questions about school and fossils and what her favorite dinosaur was, Ankylosaurus, because it had armor. When they finally left, Jamie hugged Victoria goodbye without being prompted. I like her, Jamie announced as they walked home. Yeah, Marcus said, me too. That night, after Jamie was asleep, Marcus sat on the couch in their cramped apartment and stared at his phone. He should have been looking for jobs, responding to emails, figuring out how to pay next month's rent. Instead, he kept thinking about the way Victoria had looked at Jamie, not with pity or discomfort, but with genuine interest. Like Jamie was a whole person worth paying attention to. He thought about the notebook full of dreams Victoria carried everywhere but seemed afraid to pursue. He thought about the way she moved through the world, carefully but not timidly. Like she'd decided she had a right to exist in whatever way worked for her. And if other people had a problem with that, it was their problem. not hers. It was the kind of quiet courage Marcus didn't know if he'd ever had. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Jamie's wonderful. Thank you for bringing her today. Marcus stared at the message. He hadn't given Victoria his number. A second text appeared. The waitress gave it to me. Hope that's okay. She seems to think we're dating. Marcus laughed out loud in the empty apartment. We're not dating, I know. But she seemed so pleased with herself for helping romance along. Didn't have the heart to correct her. Marcus hesitated, then typed, Same time tomorrow? The reply came immediately. Wouldn't miss it. Marcus set down his phone and leaned back against the couch. For the first time in 2 years, something in his chest felt lighter. November in Chicago was brutal. The kind of cold that got into your bones and stayed there, turning your fingers stiff and your breath into visible clouds that hung in the air. Marcus had stopped noticing it most days. Cold was just another thing that happened, like bills and bad coffee and waking up tired. But Victoria noticed everything. Your coat's too thin, she said one morning as he sat down across from her. It's fine. It's not fine, you're shivering. I'm fine, he repeated, but she was already pulling something out of her bag, a scarf, dark blue and impossibly soft. Here, I can't take that. You're not taking it, I'm giving it to you. She pushed it across the table. It's cashmere. I have 3 more at home, just take it. Marcus stared at the scarf. It probably cost more than his rent. Victoria, please. Her voice was quiet but firm. Let me do this one thing. You let me sit here every morning and talk your ear off about buildings I'll probably never design and dreams I'm too scared to chase. Let me do this. He picked up the scarf. It was warm and ridiculously soft, and when he wrapped it around his neck, something in Victoria's expression eased. Thank you, he said. You're welcome. They fell back into their usual rhythm after that. Victoria working on something in her notebook, Marcus pretending to read the news on his phone while actually just watching her work. Can I ask you something? Marcus said after a while. Always. Why are you really here? Every morning, same time, same place. You said your apartment's too quiet, but I don't know. That doesn't feel like the whole reason. Victoria set down her pen. For a moment, Marcus thought she was going to deflect or change the subject, but then she sighed. I'm hiding, she said. From what? My life. She gestured vaguely, like her life was something hovering just outside the cafe windows. I have this company. I built it from nothing after the accident because I needed something to do that wasn't just existing, and it's successful. More successful than I ever thought it would be. But now there are all these people depending on me and board meetings and investors and decisions I'm supposed to make, and She stopped, took a breath. I needed somewhere I could be no one. Just a woman with a notebook and too many dreams. You're not no one, Marcus said. To you, maybe. But to most people, I'm either Victoria Lorne's CEO or that woman with the disability. There's no in between. Marcus nodded slowly. That why you never mentioned the company before? Yes. Is that okay? Yeah. He meant it. I don't care about your company. I care about the person who sits here and drinks Earl Grey and gets excited about buildings that might never exist. Victoria's eyes went bright, like she might cry, but she didn't. She just smiled. Thank you, she said. For what? For seeing me. They sat in comfortable silence after that, the cafe humming with noise around them, conversations and laughter and the hiss of the espresso machine, but somehow it all felt distant, like they were in their own small bubble of quiet. What's the one thing you'd do? Victoria asked suddenly, if you weren't afraid. Marcus didn't even have to think about it. I'd go back to school, finish my degree. What were you studying? Engineering. I dropped out when Jamie was born because we needed the money, but I always thought I'd go back. And then life happened, and now it just feels impossible. What if it's not? Victoria, no, seriously. What if it's not impossible? What if you're just scared? Marcus laughed bitterly. Of course I'm scared. I can barely afford to keep the lights on. How am I supposed to afford tuition? I don't know. But does that mean you give up? It means I'm realistic. Realistic is just another word for too scared to try. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, But Victoria was giving him that look again, the one that said she saw right through all his excuses to the truth underneath. "Fine," he said. "What about you? If you weren't afraid, what would you do?" Victoria didn't hesitate. "I'd start the foundation, today. I'd find a building and hire architects and actually make it real instead of just writing about it in a notebook." "So why don't you?" "Because," she stopped. "Because what if I fail?" "What if you don't?" They stared at each other across the table, both of them caught in the same trap, both of them too afraid to reach for the things they actually wanted. "We're a mess," Marcus said finally. "Yeah," Victoria smiled. "We really are." But somehow, sitting there together, the mess didn't feel quite so overwhelming. 3 weeks after they first met, Victoria didn't show up. Marcus waited for 45 minutes, drinking coffee he couldn't afford, and checking his phone every 2 minutes like maybe he'd missed a text. Nothing. He told himself it was fine. People had lives. Things came up. It didn't mean anything. But his chest felt tight anyway. The next day, she wasn't there either, or the day after that. By the 4th day, Marcus was starting to panic in a way that didn't make sense. She didn't owe him anything. They weren't dating. They weren't even really friends, not in any official way. They were just two people who'd gotten used to sitting together in a cafe. But the cafe felt wrong without her, too loud and too empty at the same time. On the 5th day, Marcus broke down and texted her. "Everything okay?" He stared at his phone for 10 minutes, waiting for the 3 dots that would mean she was typing. They never came. That night, Jamie found him sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. "You're sad," she said. "I'm fine, kiddo." "No, you're not. You have your sad face on." Marcus pulled her onto the couch beside him. She curled into his side, small and warm, and the only good thing in his life. "You miss Victoria," Jamie said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah. Me too. She was nice." "She is nice." "So why isn't she coming to the cafe anymore?" "I don't know, Jamie." They sat there together, and Marcus tried not to think about all the ways people disappeared from your life without warning. His wife, his parents, friends who'd stopped calling when the going got tough. He'd thought Victoria was different. Maybe he'd been wrong. Us. On the 6th day, Victoria texted back. "I'm sorry, something came up. Can you come to this address?" She sent a location, an apartment building in a part of Chicago Marcus had never been to, the kind where doormen wore actual uniforms and the lobby probably had chandeliers. "Is everything okay? Please just come." Marcus stared at his phone. He should have said no. Should have told her that disappearing for almost a week and then summoning him to her apartment was not how this worked. But something in those 2 words, please and just, made him grab his coat. The building was exactly as fancy as he'd imagined. The doorman looked at him like he'd wandered in from a different planet, but when Marcus gave Victoria's name, the man's expression shifted to something almost respectful. 23rd floor, she's expecting you." The elevator was all mirrors and brass, and Marcus spent the ride up, trying not to look at his reflection. The thin coat, the scarf Victoria had given him, the face of a man who hadn't slept well in days. The doors opened onto a hallway that smelled like expensive carpet and money. Victoria's apartment was at the end. The door was already open. "Victoria?" Marcus called, stepping inside. "In here." He followed her voice through a living room that looked like something from a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that was probably worth more than his car, art on the walls that might have been real, until he found her in the bedroom. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, still wearing pajamas even though it was 2 in the afternoon. Her prosthetic was lying on the floor beside her, and without it, her leg ended just below the knee in a mass of scar tissue and skin that looked painful even from across the room. She looked exhausted. Not the kind of tired that came from lack of sleep, but the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting something for too long. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I know I disappeared. I know I should have called sooner. What happened?" "Nerve pain. It happens sometimes, usually when the weather changes. But this time it was bad. Really bad. I couldn't wear the prosthetic, couldn't use the crutches without making it worse, couldn't even think straight most days." Marcus moved closer, careful, like she might bolt. "You should have told me." "I couldn't. I couldn't text you and say, hey, I'm having a breakdown because my body's failing me again while you're dealing with your own problems. Victoria, and I didn't want you to see me like this. Her voice cracked. Like I'm broken. Like I'm the tragic figure everyone thinks I am. Marcus sat down on the bed beside her, not touching, just close. You're not broken, he said. Yes, I am. Look at me. I am looking at you, and you're not broken. You're in pain. That's not the same thing. Victoria let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Everyone always says the right thing, she said, but they don't mean it. They just want me to feel better so they can stop feeling uncomfortable. I'm not everyone. She turned to look at him finally, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. No, she said quietly. You're not. They sat there in silence, and Marcus realized something he probably should have realized weeks ago. He cared about this woman, not because she was rich or successful or had dreams written in a leather notebook, not even because she'd given him a scarf and talked to Jamie like she mattered. He cared because she was real, because she was messy and scared and convinced she was failing, just like him. Can I stay? Marcus asked. You don't have to. I know. Can I anyway? Victoria's expression did something complicated. Then she nodded. Okay. Marcus stayed until evening, and then he texted his neighbor to check on Jamie and stayed through the night. He didn't do anything dramatic. He just stayed, made tea when Victoria asked for it, sat beside her when the pain got bad and she needed someone there who wasn't trying to fix her, didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. And when she finally fell asleep sometime after midnight, Marcus covered her with a blanket and sat in the chair by the window, watching the city lights and thinking about how strange it was that sometimes the most important thing you could do for someone was just refuse to leave. When Marcus woke up, his neck was stiff from sleeping in the chair, and the first gray light of morning was bleeding through the windows. Victoria was still asleep, curled on her side with one hand tucked under her cheek, like a kid. For someone who usually held herself so carefully, she looked small now, vulnerable in a way that made Marcus's chest ache. He should have left, should have slipped out quietly before she woke up and things got awkward, but his feet wouldn't move. You're still here. Marcus jerked his head toward the bed. Victoria's eyes were open, watching him. I didn't want to leave without saying something, he said. You could have just left. Most people would have. I'm not most people. A faint smile crossed her face. No, you're really not. She sat up slowly, wincing as she moved. Her hair was a mess and there were pillow creases on her cheek, and Marcus thought she'd never looked more real. How's the pain? He asked. Better. Not good, but better. She glanced at the prosthetic still lying on the floor. I should probably try to... Don't. Not if you're not ready. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, like she was trying to figure out if he meant it. I have crutches in the closet, she said finally. Can you grab them? Marcus found them tucked behind a row of coats that probably cost more than everything he owned combined. He brought them to the bed and Victoria fitted them onto her arms with movements that were practiced but slower than usual, like every small motion cost her something. I need coffee, she said. I'll make it. You don't have to... Victoria, let me make the coffee. She opened her mouth like she was going to argue, then closed it and nodded. The kitchen was the kind of space Marcus had only seen in home renovation shows. Marble countertops, appliances that looked like they belonged in a spaceship, cabinets that probably had organizers for the organizers. He felt out of place just standing there, but the coffee maker was straightforward enough, and by the time Victoria made her way into the kitchen, he had 2 mugs ready. You didn't have to stay last night, she said, accepting the mug he handed her. I know. So why did you? Marcus leaned against the counter. Because you asked me to come, and when I got here, you looked like someone who needed a person to just be there, not fix anything. Not say the right things. Just stay. Victoria stared into her coffee like it held answers. I haven't let anyone see me like that in 3 years, she said quietly. Not since the accident. I always make sure I'm put together before anyone shows up. Hair done, makeup on, prosthetic fitted perfectly. Like if I look fine, then I am fine. That sounds exhausting. It is. She took a sip of coffee, made a face. This is terrible, by the way. Yeah, I noticed. You have fancy everything except, apparently, coffee that doesn't taste like dirt. That got a real laugh out of her, and something in Marcus's chest loosened. They stood there in the kitchen drinking bad coffee while the city woke up outside the windows, and Marcus realized he'd never felt more comfortable in a space that should have made him feel completely out of place. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said after a while. "Okay. I'm a billionaire." Marcus blinked. "What?" "I know I mentioned the company, but I didn't tell you how big it is, how much it's worth, how much I'm worth." She set down her mug. "Victoria Lorne Technologies, VLT. We design adaptive technology for people with disabilities, prosthetics, mobility devices, communication tools. It started as something I built for myself, and now we have contracts with hospitals and rehab centers across the country." Marcus just stared at her. "I should have told you sooner," Victoria continued, "but I like that you didn't know, that you just saw me as a person, not as a CEO or a net worth or someone you needed to act differently around." "I don't care how much money you have," Marcus said. "Everyone cares." "I don't. I care that you show up at the cafe every morning even though you're in pain half the time. I care that you talk to my daughter like she mattered. I care that you're terrified of your own dreams, but you keep writing them down anyway." He paused. "The money doesn't change any of that." Victoria's eyes went bright again, and this time a few tears actually spilled over. She wiped them away impatiently. "Sorry, I'm a mess lately." "You're allowed to be a mess." "Am I?" She let out a shaky laugh. "Because it doesn't feel like it. There are 200 people who work for me, investors who expect returns, clients who depend on what we build. I can't afford to be a mess." "Maybe that's the problem." Victoria looked at him sharply. "Maybe you've spent so long trying to be perfect that you've forgotten it's okay to fall apart sometimes," Marcus said. "To need help. To admit when things are hard." Says the man who wore a coat 3 sizes too thin all through November because he couldn't admit he needed a warmer one. "Fair point." Marcus set down his own mug. "We're both terrible at asking for help." "Yeah, we really are." They stood there in the too fancy kitchen with the bad coffee and the morning light turning everything gold, and Marcus thought about how strange it was that sometimes you found the person who understood you best in the last place you'd ever think to look. "I should go," he said. "Jamie's probably wondering where I am." "Okay." But neither of them moved. "Can I come back?" Marcus asked. "To check on you, I mean. Make sure you're eating something that isn't just coffee." Victoria smiled. "I'd like that." "Good." Marcus made it to the door before Victoria called after him. "Marcus?" He turned. "Thank you for staying, for not making it weird." "Any time," he said, and meant it. The doorman gave him a slightly less suspicious look on the way out, and Marcus walked back through the early morning Chicago streets feeling like something fundamental had shifted, but he couldn't quite name what. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. That really was terrible coffee. Marcus smiled despite himself. "I know. We should stick to the cafe. Same time tomorrow?" "Wouldn't miss it." When Marcus got home, Jamie was eating cereal and watching cartoons in her pajamas. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was folding laundry at the kitchen table. "Everything okay?" Mrs. Chen asked. "Yeah, sorry I was gone so long." "No problem. Jamie was an angel." Mrs. Chen stood, gathering her things. "You look better." "Better than what?" "Than you have in weeks. Whatever you were doing, keep doing it." After she left, Jamie climbed onto the couch beside Marcus. "Where were you?" she asked. "At Victoria's. She wasn't feeling well." "Is she okay now?" "She's getting there." Jamie nodded seriously. "Sometimes people need someone to stay with them when they're sad. That's what you always do for me." Marcus pulled her close. "Yeah, kiddo, that's exactly what it is." They spent the rest of the day doing laundry and playing dinosaurs and trying to ignore the stack of bills on the counter. For once, Marcus didn't feel the usual weight of panic pressing down on him. There were still problems, still debts and decisions, and a future that felt uncertain at best. But for the first time in a long time, he also had something else. Hope, maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. The next morning, Victoria was back at the cafe. Same table, same tea, same notebook. But something about her had changed. She looked tired still, but not defeated. More like someone who'd been through a battle and come out the other side. "Hey," Marcus said, sliding into his usual seat. "Hey yourself." They fell into their routine like the week-long gap had never happened. Victoria worked on her sketches. Marcus pretended to read the news. The cafe hummed around them. I made a decision, Victoria said after a while. Yeah? I'm going to do it. The foundation, the sanctuary, whatever you want to call it. She looked up, and her eyes were determined in a way Marcus hadn't seen before. I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of writing about it instead of building it. That's huge. I know. I'm terrified, but I think that means I have to do it. Marcus grinned. When do you start? I already did. I called my architect this morning. We're meeting next week to look at properties. She paused. I want you to come with me. What? Why? Because you see things clearly. Because you don't have any stake in this, so you'll tell me the truth. Because... She stopped. Because I want you there. Marcus wanted to say yes immediately, but his brain was already calculating the logistics. Time off from the part-time job he'd just started, arrangements for Jamie, the uncomfortable reality of showing up to look at expensive properties when he could barely afford his rent. You're overthinking, Victoria said. I'm being practical. You're being scared. Maybe both. Victoria closed her notebook and leaned forward. I get it. This is weird. We're weird. I'm a billionaire asking a guy I met in a cafe a month ago to help me make the biggest decision of my life. That's insane. Kind of, yeah. But I trust you, Marcus. I trust your judgment. And I think... She hesitated. I think you need this too. Need something to care about besides just surviving. She wasn't wrong. Marcus had spent 2 years in survival mode, and somewhere along the way he'd forgotten what it felt like to actually want something. Okay, he said. Okay? I'll come with you. Victoria's whole face transformed. Really? Really, but I can't promise I'll be useful. I don't know anything about buildings, or foundations, or whatever rich people do with their money. You know what matters. That's enough. They spent the rest of the morning talking about Victoria's plans. She'd been thinking about this for years, apparently. Had notebooks full of ideas and sketches and research. She wanted a space that felt welcoming instead of institutional, that had gardens and natural light and rooms where people could just exist without anyone asking what was wrong with them. It's going to be expensive, Victoria said, not just to build, but to run. I'll need to set up an endowment, hire staff, figure out accessibility features that actually work instead of just checking boxes. Sounds like you've thought this through. I've done nothing but think about it for 3 years. Now, I just need to actually do it. Marcus watched her talk, hands moving as she described her vision, eyes bright with something that looked like joy. And he realized something that should have scared him, but somehow didn't. He was falling for her. Not in some dramatic movie moment way, just quietly, steadily, like water wearing down stone. Falling for the way she chewed her pen when she was thinking. The way she always ordered Earl Grey even though the cafe's version was mediocre at best. The way she looked at Jamie like children were actual people worth listening to. The way she was terrified and brave at the same time. What? Victoria asked, catching him staring. Nothing, just thinking. About? About how I'm glad you sat at my table that day. Victoria's expression softened. Me too. The moment stretched between them, fragile and important, and Marcus knew they were standing on the edge of something that could change everything. Then Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her whole posture changed, went tight and professional. I have to take this, she said. Work thing. She stepped outside and Marcus watched through the window as she paced back and forth, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesturing sharply. Even from inside he could see the shift, the Cafe Victoria disappearing and the CEO Victoria taking over. When she came back in, she looked exhausted again. Everything okay? Marcus asked. Problem at the office. I need to go deal with it. Do you want... No, it's fine. She gathered her things quickly. I'll text you about the property viewing. Next Tuesday, probably. Okay. She was already halfway to the door when she turned back. I'm sorry, I know this is... Victoria, it's fine. Go do your job. She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. Then she was gone, and Marcus was alone at the table with 2 half-finished cups of coffee and the feeling that something had just cracked in the careful bubble they'd built. His phone buzzed an hour later. I'm sorry about this morning. Work's been crazy, Don't apologize. I get it. Do you? Because sometimes I feel like I'm living two completely different lives, and I don't know how to make them fit together. Marcus stared at his phone. He could feel her pulling away, getting scared, retreating back into the version of herself that didn't let anyone see the mess. You don't have to make them fit together. You just have to be honest about both of them. The three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. But maybe we can figure it out. There was a long pause. Then, same time tomorrow? Always. But the next day, Victoria didn't show up. Or the day after that. Marcus told himself it was fine. She was busy. Important people had important things to do. But his chest felt tight anyway, and the cafe felt wrong again, and he hated how much he'd let himself depend on those morning hours. On the third day, she finally texted, "I'm sorry. I know I keep disappearing. Work's imploding, and I'm barely holding it together. What's going on? Board meeting disaster. Investors pulling out. Problems with a product launch. The usual corporate nightmare. Sounds terrible." It is. And the worst part is I can't even focus on it because all I want to do is work on the foundation plans, but everyone's telling me now's not the time, that I need to focus on the company first. Marcus read the message 3 times, hearing the exhaustion and frustration bleeding through. What do you want to do? I don't know anymore. Yes, you do. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared for a full minute. Then, can I call you? Yeah. His phone rang immediately. Hey, Victoria said, and her voice sounded rough, like she'd been crying or not sleeping, or both. You sound terrible. Thanks. That's exactly what every woman wants to hear. I mean, you sound like you need sleep and possibly food and definitely a break from whatever's happening. I can't take a break. If I step away now, everything falls apart. Maybe it needs to fall apart. Silence on the other end. What? Victoria asked finally. Maybe you're holding on so tight to this perfect image of yourself. The successful CEO who never struggles, the woman who has everything figured out, that you're not letting yourself actually live. Maybe it's okay to let some things fall apart so you can build the things that actually matter. That's easy for you to say. You're not responsible for 200 jobs. You're right, I'm not. But I'm responsible for one 8-year-old who needs me to be present. And I spent 2 years drowning in survival mode before I realized that maybe I needed to ask for help. Maybe I needed to admit I couldn't do everything perfectly. He could hear Victoria breathing on the other end of the line. I'm scared, she said finally. Of what? That if I step back from the company to focus on the foundation, everyone will see that I'm not actually capable of doing both. That I'm failing. You're not failing. You're human. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah, there really is. Victoria let out a long breath. I don't know how to do this. How to be the CEO and the woman who wants to build something meaningful, and the person who just wants to sit in a cafe drinking tea with someone who doesn't expect anything from me. Maybe you don't have to figure it all out at once. Maybe you just take the next step. What's the next step? Come back to the cafe tomorrow morning, same time. We'll drink bad coffee and you can show me more of your sketches and we'll figure out the rest as we go. Just like that? Just like that. There was a pause, and then Victoria laughed. It sounded wet, like she was crying and laughing at the same time. Okay, she said. Okay, I'll be there. Good. Marcus? Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on me when I keep disappearing. I'm not going anywhere, Victoria. You're stuck with me. He meant it as a joke, but it came out serious, and the silence that followed felt heavy with things neither of them were ready to say out loud. Same time tomorrow, Victoria said finally. I'll be there. The next morning, Victoria showed up at the cafe looking like she'd been through a war. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy knot, wearing jeans instead of her usual elegant clothes. But she was smiling, and that counted for something. I quit, she said, dropping into her seat. Marcus's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. What? Not the company, just I stepped down as CEO, promoted my COO to take over day-to-day operations. I'm staying on the board, keeping my stake, but I'm done trying to run everything. Victoria, Don't tell me I'm being impulsive or that I'll regret it. I've spent 3 days thinking about nothing else, and this is the right choice. I can't build the foundation while trying to run a company. Something had to give. Marcus set down his coffee. How do you feel? Terrified, relieved, like I just jumped off a cliff and I'm not sure if I'm flying or falling. Probably both. Yeah, she smiled shakily. Probably both. They sat there for a moment, and Marcus could see her hands trembling slightly where they rested on the table. He reached over and covered one of them with his own. You did the right thing, he said. You don't know that. Yeah, I do, because I've watched you for 2 months now, and I've never seen you light up when you talk about the company. But when you talk about the foundation, you look like someone who's finally found what they're supposed to be doing. Victoria turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. It was the first time they'd held hands, and it felt both natural and terrifying. I'm scared I'm going to screw this up, she said quietly. You will. We all do. But at least you'll be screwing up something you actually care about. That got a real laugh out of her. They spent the rest of the morning talking about next steps. Victoria had meetings scheduled with architects and contractors. She'd narrowed down 3 potential properties in different parts of the city. She wanted Marcus to see all of them, give his honest opinion, help her figure out which one felt right. What do I know about buildings? Marcus protested. You know what it feels like to need a place where you belong. That's more valuable than any architectural degree. She said it simply, like it was obvious, and Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. Okay, he said. When do we start? Tuesday. First viewing's at 10. Can you make it? Marcus thought about his schedule, the part-time delivery job he'd picked up, the constant juggling of Jamie's school and his bills and the 1,000 small emergencies that made up his life. I'll make it work, he said. Victoria squeezed his hand. Thank you. They stayed at the cafe until noon, longer than usual, neither of them wanting to leave the small bubble they'd created. But eventually the real world intruded. Victoria's phone buzzing with messages from her board, Marcus's reminder that he needed to pick up Jamie from school. Same time tomorrow? Victoria asked as they stood to leave. Always. Outside the cafe, they stood awkwardly on the sidewalk. Usually this was where they said goodbye, headed off in different directions to their separate lives. But today felt different, like something had shifted and neither of them knew quite what to do about it. I should go, Victoria said. Yeah. But she didn't move, and neither did Marcus. This is weird, Victoria said finally. What is? This. Us. Whatever this is becoming. Marcus's heart was hammering. Does it have to be weird? I don't know. I've never... She stopped. I haven't let anyone this close in 3 years, and you're not like anyone I've ever known. Is that bad? No. It's terrifying. Marcus understood that. Everything about this was terrifying. The way she made him feel like maybe he wasn't failing at everything. The way her smile could change his entire day. The way he'd started thinking about a future that involved more than just surviving. We don't have to figure it out right now, he said. No? No. We can just keep showing up, keep having coffee, keep figuring it out one day at a time. Victoria nodded slowly. I can do that. Good. She turned to leave, then stopped and turned back. Before Marcus could process what was happening, she'd stepped forward and hugged him. Just a quick embrace, there and gone, but it left him stunned. Thank you, she said, for everything. Then she was walking away, moving carefully through the afternoon crowd. And Marcus stood there on the sidewalk feeling like his entire world had just tilted on its axis. His phone buzzed. That was weird. Sorry. Marcus smiled and typed back. Good weird, yeah? Yeah. When he picked up Jamie from school that afternoon, she took one look at his face and grinned. You're smiling, she announced. I smile sometimes. Not like that, you don't. Did something good happen? Marcus thought about Victoria's hand in his, about her stepping down from the company, about the way she'd hugged him on the sidewalk, like it mattered. Yeah, he said. Something good happened. Is it about Victoria? Maybe. Jamie nodded sagely. I knew it. You like her. It's not... We're just friends, kiddo. Dad, you're terrible at lying. She wasn't wrong. Marcus had never been good at hiding what he felt. and what he felt for Victoria was getting harder to ignore with every passing day. That night, after Jamie was asleep, Marcus sat on the couch and let himself think about it. Really think about it. About what it might mean to let someone in, to stop just surviving and start actually living. It was terrifying. But maybe Victoria was right. Maybe being terrified meant you had to do it anyway. His phone lit up with another text. Still awake? Yeah, can't sleep. Me neither. Keep thinking about Tuesday, about the properties, about all the ways this could go wrong. What about all the ways it could go right? There was a pause. Then, I'm not used to thinking like that. Me neither. But maybe we should start. Maybe. Victoria? Yeah? I'm glad you sat at my table that day. Me too, Marcus. Me too. Marcus set down his phone and stared at the ceiling, and for the first time in 2 years, the future felt like something worth looking forward to instead of something to survive. Tuesday morning came with freezing rain that turned the sidewalks into skating rinks and made Marcus question every decision that had led him to standing outside a building in Lincoln Park at 9:45, waiting for Victoria's car to arrive. He'd borrowed a better jacket from his neighbor's son, still not great, but at least it didn't have holes in the lining, and tried to look like someone who belonged in a neighborhood where the coffee shops had names in French and the dogs wore actual coats. Victoria's car pulled up at exactly 9:50. Not a car, really, a town car with a driver. Because of course it was. She stepped out carefully, using her crutches, and Marcus noticed she was wearing the prosthetic today. She caught him looking. Bad pain day yesterday, she said, but I needed to be mobile for this. Professional image and all that. You don't have to explain. I know, but I wanted to. The driver nodded at Marcus like he was expected, which was somehow more unsettling than being treated like an intruder. Ready? Victoria asked. As I'll ever be. The first property was in a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and industrial windows. The real estate agent met them at the door, a woman in her 50s wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ms. Lorne, wonderful to see you again, and you must be Mr. Hale. Marcus shook her hand, wondering how Victoria had described him. Business partner? Consultant? Friend? Just Marcus is fine. Of course, shall we? The space was massive. High ceilings, natural light pouring through skylights. Enough room for probably a dozen different areas. The agent walked them through, pointing out features and potential, but Marcus could barely focus on her words. He was too busy watching Victoria. She moved through the space slowly, running her hand along the brick walls, peering up at the ceiling beams, her expression thoughtful in a way that made her look younger somehow, less guarded. What do you think? She asked Marcus when the agent stepped away to take a phone call. It's huge. That's not helpful. I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking for here. You're the one with the vision. Victoria stopped and turned to face him fully. Does it feel welcoming? If you walked in here and didn't know what this place was for, would you feel safe? Marcus looked around again, really looked this time. The space was beautiful in an industrial, trendy way, but there was something cold about it, something that felt more like a tech startup than a sanctuary. Honestly, no, it feels like somewhere you'd have meetings, not somewhere you'd just exist. Victoria nodded slowly. That's what I thought too, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't being too picky. You're not being picky. This is important. The agent came back, all bright smiles and sales pitch, but Victoria cut her off gently. Thank you for your time. I don't think this is quite right for what we need. They moved on to the second property, a brownstone in Hyde Park that had been a community center before funding dried up. This one felt warmer, more human-scaled. Rooms that could be meeting spaces or quiet corners, a kitchen that looked lived in, a small garden out back that was currently buried under dead leaves and snow but had potential. Better? Victoria asked. Definitely better. They spent an hour walking through the space, Victoria making notes in her ever-present notebook, Marcus trying to imagine what each room could become. The agent here was different, older, softer around the edges, asking questions that suggested she actually cared what the space would be used for. It needs work, Victoria said when they were standing in the garden, breath fogging in the cold air. A lot of work. Full accessibility retrofit, new heating system, probably new wiring. But, But it feels right. It feels like somewhere people could actually heal. Marcus watched her stare at the building, and he could see it. The vision taking shape in her mind, the dream becoming something real and possible. "There's one more," the agent said, "in Pilsen. It's further out, but the space is remarkable." The third property was in a former church, and the moment Marcus walked through the doors, he knew this was it. The main sanctuary had been converted into an open space with soaring ceilings and light streaming through tall windows. The stained glass had been replaced with clear panels, but somehow it still felt sacred. Not in any formal sense, just in the way the light moved through the room, the way the space seemed to hold silence like something precious. Victoria stopped in the center of the room and just stood there, not saying anything. Marcus stayed quiet, letting her process whatever she was feeling. "This is it," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is the one." The agent smiled. "I thought you might feel that way. There are offices in the back, a commercial kitchen in the basement, and the second floor has been converted into smaller meeting rooms. It needs accessibility work, of course, but the bones are solid." They spent 2 hours exploring every corner. Victoria took photos and measurements, filled page after page in her notebook, asked a million questions about permits and zoning and structural integrity. Marcus mostly stayed quiet, but every so often she'd turn to him with a question that had nothing to do with logistics and everything to do with feeling. "Could you see someone sitting here and feeling safe? Does this room feel too institutional? Is the light too harsh?" And every time Marcus answered honestly, and every time Victoria listened like his opinion actually mattered. When they finally left, it was almost 2 in the afternoon, and Marcus's stomach was growling loud enough that Victoria noticed. "When did you last eat?" she asked. "Breakfast. Coffee, technically." "That's not breakfast, that's caffeine delivery." She turned to her driver. "Can you find us somewhere to get food?" "Victoria, you don't have to." "Marcus, shut up and let me buy you lunch." They ended up at a Mexican place 2 blocks away, the kind of hole-in-the-wall with plastic chairs and handwritten menus that served the best food Marcus had eaten in months. Victoria ordered like someone who actually knew what she was doing, rattling off dishes in Spanish that had the waitress beaming. "You speak Spanish?" Marcus asked. "My mom was from Mexico. She died when I was 14, but she made sure I grew up bilingual." Victoria paused. "I don't talk about her much. Haven't really since the accident." "Why not?" "Because she was the kind of person who lived fearlessly, who took risks and didn't apologize for wanting things. And after I lost my leg, I spent 3 years being the opposite of that. Playing it safe. Building a company because it was logical, not because it made me happy." She looked up at Marcus. "Being around you reminds me of her, the way you just say what you're thinking, the way you don't pretend things are fine when they're not." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain that half the time he felt like he was drowning, and the only thing keeping him afloat was stubbornness and spite. The food arrived, and for a few minutes they just ate, letting the conversation rest. "I'm going to make an offer on the church," Victoria said finally. "Tomorrow. I want to move fast before I lose my nerve." "You're not going to lose your nerve." "How do you know?" "Because you've already made the hard choice. You stepped down from the company. Everything after that is just details." Victoria smiled around a mouthful of taco. "Just details." "Right. Like finding architects and contractors and staff and funding. You'll figure it out." "We'll figure it out." Marcus looked at her. "We? I want you involved in this. Not just as moral support, but actually involved. Helping make decisions, working with the design team, being part of making this real." "Victoria, I don't have any qualifications." "You have the only qualification that matters. You understand what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like the world doesn't have space for you." She leaned forward. "I need that perspective. I need someone who'll tell me when something feels wrong, even if it looks perfect on paper." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But the truth was, he wanted to say yes. Wanted to be part of something that mattered, something bigger than just getting through the next day. "Okay," he said. "Okay? Yeah, I'm in." Victoria's whole face lit up, and Marcus felt something in his chest expand to the point of almost hurting. They spent the rest of lunch talking about timelines and budgets and all the practical details that turn dreams into reality. By the time they left, Marcus's head was spinning with ideas and possibilities, and the terrifying realization that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't predict. Victoria's driver dropped him off at home, and Marcus spent the walk to his apartment trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand how he'd gone from struggling to keep the lights on to helping plan a multi-million-dollar foundation project. Jamie was at Mrs. Chen's. Marcus could hear cartoons through the door, hear Jamie's laugh, and something about the normalcy of it made his throat tight. His phone buzzed. "Thank you for today. I couldn't have done this without you. You could have. But I'm glad I was there." "Me too. Same time tomorrow at the cafe?" "Always." But the next morning, Marcus woke up to 3 missed calls from Victoria and a text that made his stomach drop. "Something's wrong. Can you come to the hospital?" Northwestern Memorial. He was out the door in 5 minutes, not even bothering to change out of the clothes he'd slept in. Mrs. Chen took Jamie without questions. Just one look at his face and a nod that said she understood it was important. The cab ride to the hospital felt like it took hours, even though it was probably 20 minutes. Marcus's mind was racing with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Another complication from her injury. An infection. Something terrible and unfixable. He found her in the emergency department waiting room, sitting in a wheelchair because apparently the hospital had insisted, looking small and scared and nothing like the composed woman he was used to seeing. "What happened?" he asked, dropping into the chair beside her. "Nerve pain. Worse than before. I woke up and couldn't move without feeling like my leg was on fire, except I don't have a leg, so it doesn't even make sense." Her words were coming out fast, panicked. "They gave me something for the pain, but it's not helping, and they want to admit me for observation, and I couldn't be alone. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called you." "Hey, stop." Marcus took her hand. "You did the right thing. I'm glad you called." "You barely know me." "That's not true." Victoria laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "This is what my life is. Random pain that makes no sense. Days where I can't function, people looking at me like I'm broken." She wiped at her eyes angrily. "And now I'm crying in a hospital waiting room. This is pathetic." "It's not pathetic, it's human. Same thing lately." A nurse called her name and Victoria stiffened. "Do you want me to come with you?" Marcus asked. "You don't have to." "Do you want me to?" Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. They moved to an exam room that smelled like antiseptic and fear. A doctor came in, young and professional and completely detached, asking questions about pain levels and medication and medical history like he was reading from a script. Marcus watched Victoria answer, her voice going flat and clinical, all the emotion draining out of her face. "We'll keep you overnight for observation," the doctor said. "Make sure the pain management is working. You should be able to go home tomorrow." After he left, Victoria just sat on the exam table staring at nothing. "I'm supposed to make an offer on the church today," she said. "I can handle that. Give me your agent's number." "Marcus." "I'll call her, explain the situation, make sure the offer goes through. You focus on getting better." "You can't just—" "Yes, I can. What else do I need to know? Is there a specific number you want to offer?" Victoria gave him the details, her voice mechanical, like she was somewhere else entirely. When she finished, she looked at him with something that might have been gratitude or might have been grief. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because you do it for me." "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do." They moved her to a room an hour later, a private one because apparently Victoria's insurance or status or whatever got her special treatment. Marcus helped her get settled, which mostly meant standing there uselessly while nurses did their jobs. "You should go," Victoria said once they were alone. "You have Jamie to worry about." "Mrs. Chen has Jamie. I'm staying." "For how long?" "However long you need me to." Victoria's eyes filled with tears again. "I hate this. I hate feeling weak. I hate that my body just randomly decides to betray me. I hate that I can't even plan my own life because I never know when this is going to happen." Marcus pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. "You're not weak," he said. "You're in pain. There's a difference." "Everyone always says that." "Do they mean it?" Victoria was quiet for a moment. "No. Usually they're just uncomfortable and want me to stop making them feel bad." "I'm not uncomfortable, and you're not making me feel bad. You're just a person dealing with something hard, and I'm a person who wants to help if you'll let me." She reached out and took his hand, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that wouldn't stop spinning. They sat like that for a long time, not talking, just existing in the same space while machines beeped and nurses came and went and the hospital went on with its business of taking care of broken things. Marcus called Victoria's real estate agent from the hallway, explained the situation, and confirmed that the offer on the church would go through as planned. He texted Mrs. Chen to let her know he'd be late. He bought terrible hospital coffee from a vending machine and brought it back to Victoria's room even though she made a face at it. "This is even worse than the cafe," she said. "I know, drink it anyway." She did, making exaggerated, disgusted faces that made Marcus laugh despite the circumstances. "Tell me something," Victoria said after a while. "Something good. I need to think about something other than this." "Like what?" "Anything. Tell me about Jamie. Tell me about your day. Tell me about the best meal you ever had or the worst date you've ever been on. Just talk to me." So Marcus talked. He told her about the time Jamie had gotten stuck in a cardboard box because she was pretending to be a dinosaur egg, about the job he'd had in college, cleaning offices at night, where he'd discovered that rich people's trash was somehow sadder than regular trash, about his mom's pot roast that had been terrible, but he'd eaten it anyway because she'd tried so hard. Victoria listened, and slowly the tight, scared look on her face eased into something softer. "Your turn," Marcus said. "Tell me something." "Like what?" "I don't know. What did you want to be when you were a kid?" Victoria smiled faintly. "An astronaut. I was obsessed with space, had posters of nebulas all over my room, made my parents take me to the planetarium every month, read every book about astronauts I could find." "What happened?" "I got older and realized I'm terrible at math. And then the accident happened and I figured being disabled probably disqualified me from space travel." She paused. "But sometimes I still look up at the stars and think about what it would be like to be up there, away from all this." "We could go sometime." "Go where?" "To a planetarium, or just somewhere dark enough to actually see stars. Chicago's terrible for that, but we could drive out somewhere." Victoria looked at him like he'd suggested something impossible instead of just a road trip. "You'd do that?" she asked. "Yeah, why not?" "Because most people say things like that and don't mean them." "I mean it." She squeezed his hand. "Okay, when I'm out of here, we'll go see the stars." "Deal." A nurse came in to check Victoria's vitals and give her more medication. Marcus stepped out into the hallway to give them privacy, and that's when he checked his phone and saw 4 missed calls from the school. His heart stopped. He called back immediately. The vice principal answered. "Mr. Hale, we've been trying to reach you. Jamie had an asthma attack during gym class. We administered her rescue inhaler and she's stable now, but we think you should come pick her up." Marcus was already moving toward the elevator. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." He went back to Victoria's room, and she took one look at his face and knew. "What's wrong?" "Jamie, I have to go." "Is she okay?" "Yeah, she's fine. Just, I need to get her." "Go. Of course, I'm fine here." Marcus hesitated at the door. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She needs you. Go." He made it to the school in 15 minutes, probably breaking several traffic laws in the process. Jamie was sitting in the nurse's office looking small and tired, her inhaler clutched in one hand. "Hey, kiddo," Marcus said, kneeling in front of her. "How you feeling?" "Tired. My chest hurts." "I know. Let's get you home." He signed her out and carried her to the car, even though she was probably too big for that now because he needed to hold her and know she was okay. "Where were you?" Jamie asked once they were driving. "At the hospital with Victoria." "Is she okay?" "She's going to be, just having a hard day." Jamie nodded against his shoulder. "Sometimes people need someone to stay with them when they're having a hard day." "Yeah, kiddo, they do." When they got home, Marcus got Jamie settled on the couch with her nebulizer and cartoons, then called the hospital to check on Victoria. "She's resting comfortably," the nurse said. "You can call back in the morning." Marcus stared at his phone, feeling pulled in 2 directions. Jamie needed him here. Victoria was alone in a hospital room, and he couldn't be in both places at once. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Is Jamie okay?" "Yeah, just tired. How are you?" "Better. The medication's finally helping." "Go take care of your daughter. I'll be fine." "You sure?" "Positive. Tell Jamie I said feel better. Marcus put his phone down and focused on Jamie, helping her with her breathing treatments, making her favorite dinner even though she barely ate any of it, sitting with her until she fell asleep. But his mind kept drifting back to Victoria alone in that hospital room, to the way she'd held his hand like he was the only thing keeping her anchored, to the fact that he couldn't remember the last time someone had needed him like that for something other than paying bills or keeping someone else alive. He fell asleep on the couch next to Jamie, and when he woke up at 3 a.m. with a crick in his neck, his phone was full of messages. Can't sleep. Pain's better, but my brain won't shut up. Sorry, I shouldn't text you this late. Actually, I'm not sorry. You said I could talk to you. So I'm talking. The church offer was accepted. We're closing in 3 weeks. 3 weeks, Marcus. 3 weeks until this becomes real. I'm terrified. Marcus smiled and typed back, not caring that it was the middle of the night. You should be terrified. It means you care. The 3 dots appeared immediately, like she'd been waiting. I do care. Too much, maybe. No such thing. Easy for you to say. Victoria, you're building something that could change people's lives. You're allowed to care about that. You're allowed to be scared of screwing it up. What if I do? Screw it up? Then you'll fix it, or you'll try something else. But at least you'll have tried. There was a long pause, then, thank you, for today, for all of it, any time, I mean it. I don't know what I would have done without you. Marcus stared at those words, feeling something shift and settle in his chest. Same time at the cafe when you're out? Wouldn't miss it. He set down his phone and looked at Jamie sleeping peacefully beside him, her breathing steady and easy now. His daughter who needed him, the woman in the hospital who needed him, the foundation that he'd somehow become part of, the life he'd built from scraps and stubbornness. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. But for the first time in years, it felt like something worth fighting for. And maybe that was enough. Victoria came back to the cafe 4 days later, moving slower than usual, but moving. She had dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, and she was using the crutches again instead of the prosthetic. But when she saw Marcus already sitting at their table, she smiled like nothing had changed. Hey, she said, settling into her seat with visible relief. Hey yourself, how are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, and then the truck backed up to make sure it finished the job. She paused. But better than I was, the new medication's helping. Marcus slid a cup of tea across the table. Earl Grey, already steeped the way she liked it. You ordered for me? Figured you'd show up eventually. Victoria wrapped her hands around the cup, and Marcus could see them trembling slightly. Not from the cold, just from everything. I'm sorry about the hospital, she said. That was a mess. Stop apologizing for being human. I'm trying. It's harder than it sounds. She took a sip of tea and made a face. Still terrible. Always has been. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the cafe filling up with the usual morning crowd. Marcus had missed this. The routine. The normalcy of sitting across from someone who didn't need him to be anything other than present. We need to talk about the foundation, Victoria said finally. I've been thinking a lot while I was stuck in bed, and I need to know if you're still in, because if we're doing this, I need you all the way in, not just showing up for property viewings and moral support. What does all the way in mean? It means I want to hire you, officially, as the Director of Community Engagement. She pulled a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. I had my lawyer draw up a contract, salary, benefits, the whole thing. You'd be helping design programs, working with architects on accessibility features, eventually running the day-to-day once we open. Marcus stared at the folder like it might explode. I can't accept this. Why not? Because I don't have any qualifications. I dropped out of college. I've spent the last 2 years doing delivery jobs and trying not to drown. I don't know anything about running programs or working with architects or any of this. You know what it's like to be invisible. You know how to talk to people like they matter. You know how to show up even when it's hard. Victoria leaned forward. That's worth more than any degree. Victoria, look at the salary before you say no. Marcus opened the folder. The number on the contract made his vision swim. This is too much. It's market rate for the position. For someone qualified, I'm not. You are. Her voice was firm. And I need someone I trust. Someone who'll tell me when I'm being stupid or out of touch, or building something that looks good on paper but doesn't actually work for real people. Marcus looked at the number again. It was more money than he'd made in the last 2 years combined. It was health insurance for Jamie. It was paying off medical bills. It was maybe, finally, breathing. "What if I screw it up?" he asked. "Then we'll fix it together, but you won't screw it up." "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do." Victoria reached across the table and put her hand over his. "I've watched you for 3 months now. I've seen how you think about things, how you care about things. You're not going to screw this up." Marcus stared at their hands, hers smaller and softer, his rough from years of manual labor. It felt like standing on the edge of something huge and terrifying and maybe, possibly, good. "Okay," he said. "Okay?" "I'm in, all the way in." Victoria's whole face transformed. She looked younger suddenly, lighter, like someone had lifted a weight she'd been carrying alone for too long. "Really?" "Really. But I need 2 weeks to give notice at my current job and figure out childcare for Jamie." "Done. Take whatever time you need." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. I think I'm starting to." They spent the rest of the morning going over details. Victoria had timelines and budgets and plans that had clearly been living in her head for years, just waiting for the right moment to become real. She talked about therapy rooms and quiet spaces and a garden where people could grow things, about art programs and support groups, and making sure nothing felt institutional or cold. "I want it to feel like home," she said, "but a home where you're actually welcome, where you don't have to pretend you're fine." That's a good mission statement. Is it too idealistic? No, I think we need more idealistic things in the world. Victoria smiled, and Marcus realized with a jolt that he'd said we, not you. We. When Victoria finally left for a meeting with her architect, Marcus sat alone at the table with the contract in front of him and tried to process what had just happened. 3 months ago, he'd been sitting in this exact spot, drowning in bills and hopelessness, convinced his life was just an endless cycle of barely surviving. Now he had a job, a real job with benefits and a salary and the chance to build something that mattered. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "I'm serious about the stargazing, by the way. Once the foundation stuff calms down. We should go. I'll hold you to that." "Good." Marcus put his phone down and laughed out loud in the empty cafe, startling a college student at the next table. He didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt like maybe things were actually going to be okay. The next 2 weeks were chaos. Marcus gave notice at his delivery job, and his boss barely looked up from his clipboard to acknowledge it. He called Jamie's school to update his employment information and was transferred 3 times before reaching someone who cared. He signed the contract with Victoria and spent an hour staring at the direct deposit information, convinced he'd wake up and discover it was all a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was real. And it was happening, and Marcus was terrified and excited in equal measure. Victoria threw herself into the foundation work with an intensity that was both inspiring and slightly concerning. They met at the cafe every morning, but now instead of just talking, they were planning, making lists, sketching ideas, arguing about whether the main space should have round tables or rectangular ones. "Round is more inclusive," Victoria said. "Round takes up more space. We can fit more people with rectangular. But then people at the ends feel isolated. What if we do a mix?" Victoria considered this, tapping her pen against her notebook. "That could work. See, this is why I need you. Because I can compromise on table shapes? Because you think about how people will actually use the space, not just what looks good in a rendering." They were a good team. Marcus was starting to realize that. Victoria had the vision and the resources and the drive to make things happen. Marcus had the practical knowledge of what it felt like to be on the other side, to be the person walking into a space hoping it would be safe. But the closer they got to closing on the church, the more Victoria's anxiety seemed to spike. She started canceling their cafe meetings, sending apologetic texts about meetings that ran late, or complications with contractors, or just needing to work from home. Marcus let it go for a week, then 2. But when she missed their 3rd meeting in a row with no explanation beyond a text that said, "Sorry, can't make it," he decided enough was enough. He showed up at her apartment at 9 in the morning with coffee from the good place, The one that cost 3 times what the cafe charged, but actually tasted like coffee instead of despair, and knocked on her door until she answered. She looked terrible. Still in pajamas, hair unwashed, eyes red like she'd been crying or not sleeping, or both. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Checking on you. Can I come in?" "I'm fine, Marcus, just busy." "You're not fine, and you're avoiding me." Victoria's jaw tightened. "I'm not avoiding you. There's a lot going on." "Then let me help." "You can't help with this?" "Try me." For a moment, Marcus thought she was going to close the door in his face, but then her shoulders sagged and she stepped aside. "Come in. But don't judge the mess." The apartment looked like a tornado had hit it. Papers everywhere, dirty dishes stacked on the counter, Victoria's notebooks scattered across every surface. It was so different from the composed, carefully maintained space he'd seen before that it was almost shocking. "Talk to me," Marcus said, setting down the coffee. "What's going on?" Victoria sank onto the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. "I'm freaking out about all of it. The foundation, the money, the responsibility. What if I build this thing and it doesn't work? What if nobody comes, or everybody comes and we can't handle it, or I hire the wrong people, or I design it wrong, Hey, breathe." "I can't. Every time I try to breathe, my chest gets tight, and I start thinking about all the ways this could fail, and then I can't think about anything else." Marcus sat down beside her, not touching, just close. "You're spiraling," he said. "I know I'm spiraling. Knowing it doesn't make it stop." "What would your mom say right now, if she was here?" Victoria went very still. "That's not fair." "I know, but what would she say?" Victoria was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. She'd say that being scared means you're doing something worth doing, that easy things don't change anything. She wiped at her eyes. She'd tell me to stop hiding in my apartment and go build something beautiful. She sounds like she was smart. She was. She was also reckless and stubborn and impossible to argue with. Victoria smiled faintly. "I think you would have liked her." "I think I would have too." They sat there while the morning light filled the room, and slowly Marcus could feel Victoria's breathing even out, the panic receding, not gone but manageable. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "for disappearing again. I keep doing that." "You do, and it's annoying as hell." Victoria let out a surprised laugh. "You're supposed to say it's okay. It's not okay. You can't just vanish every time things get hard, not if we're actually doing this together." "I don't know how to not do that." "Then learn." "I did." Victoria looked at him. "When?" "When I realized that pushing everyone away was just making everything worse. When I figured out that asking for help wasn't the same as admitting I'd failed." He paused. "It took me 2 years and a random woman sitting at my cafe table to figure that out, but I got there eventually." "A random woman, huh?" "Extremely random. Kind of pushy, actually." "I'm not pushy. You literally handed me a job contract and told me I was qualified for it, even though I have zero relevant experience." "That's not pushy. That's recognizing potential." "It's definitely pushy." Victoria laughed again, and this time it sounded real. "Okay, maybe I'm a little pushy." "A little? Fine, very pushy. Happy now?" Ecstatic. Marcus stood and started gathering up the dirty dishes, carrying them to the kitchen. Victoria followed, protesting. "You don't have to do that." "I know, but I'm doing it anyway." "Marcus." "Victoria, let me help." That's what friends do. She stopped arguing, just stood there watching him wash dishes like it was the most fascinating thing she'd ever seen. "Is that what we are?" she asked after a while. "Friends?" Marcus turned off the water and dried his hands. "I don't know. What would you call it?" "I don't know either. More than friends, maybe, but I don't want to put a label on it and mess it up." "Then let's not label it. Let's just keep showing up." Victoria nodded slowly. "I can do that." "Good. Now get dressed. We have a meeting with the contractor in 2 hours and you look like you've been living in a cave." "That's rude." "It's honest. There's a difference." Victoria went to get ready, and Marcus finished cleaning up the kitchen. When she came back 20 minutes later, showered and dressed and looking more like herself, something in her posture had shifted, less defeated, more determined. "Thank you," she said, "for showing up, for not letting me hide. Someone very wise once told me that sometimes people need someone to stay with them when they're having a hard day. Jamie told you that? She did. She's smarter than both of us combined. The meeting with the contractor was long and technical and full of terms Marcus didn't understand, but Victoria was in her element, asking sharp questions and pushing back on estimates that seemed inflated. Marcus mostly watched and learned, occasionally pointing out things from a user perspective that the contractor hadn't considered. The ramp needs to be wider, Marcus said at one point. If someone's using a wheelchair and someone else is walking, they should be able to pass each other comfortably. The contractor frowned. That'll add to the cost. Then add to the cost, Victoria said. Marcus is right. We're building this for people, not just to meet code minimums. After the meeting, they walked through the church one more time. It was still empty, still needed a massive amount of work, but Marcus could see it now. The vision Victoria had been carrying in her head for so long. The quiet spaces and the gathering areas in the garden that would bloom in the spring. It's going to be beautiful, he said. You think? I know. Victoria stopped in the center of what would become the main room and just stood there, taking it all in. I'm still terrified, she admitted. Good. Means you care. You keep saying that, because it keeps being true. They stood there together in the empty space, and Marcus felt something settle in his chest. This was real. They were actually doing this, building something that mattered, something that could change lives. His phone rang. Jamie's school. Again. Marcus's stomach dropped as he answered. Mr. Hale, this is the nurse. Jamie's having trouble breathing. Her inhaler isn't helping as much as it should. We think you should come get her and maybe consider taking her to the doctor. Marcus was already moving toward the door. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He hung up and turned to Victoria. I have to go. Jamie, go. I'll handle the rest here. Marcus hesitated. We were supposed to meet the architect at 3, and I can handle that alone. Your daughter needs you. That comes first. Victoria, Marcus, go. I've got this. He went, practically running to his car, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Jamie had been doing better lately. The new medication was supposed to be helping, but asthma was unpredictable, and Chicago's winter air was brutal on lungs. Jamie was sitting in the nurse's office, her breathing labored, her face scared in a way that made Marcus's heart crack. Hey, kiddo, he said, keeping his voice calm, even though his insides were screaming. Let's get you to the doctor. The pediatrician saw them right away, which somehow made it worse. When doctors moved fast, it meant they were worried. She listened to Jamie's lungs, asked questions about recent symptoms, then looked at Marcus with an expression that made his blood run cold. Her asthma's not well controlled, the doctor said. We need to adjust her medications, maybe add a daily maintenance inhaler. And I want to do a chest x-ray just to make sure there's nothing else going on. Something else like what? Probably nothing, but let's be thorough. The x-ray was clear, which should have been a relief, but the medication adjustment meant more expenses and more worry and more nights lying awake wondering if this was going to be the attack that got really bad. By the time they got home, Jamie was exhausted and Marcus was running on fumes. He got her settled on the couch with her nebulizer and a blanket, then collapsed in the chair beside her. His phone buzzed. Victoria. How's Jamie? Scared. Doctor adjusted her meds. She's okay, but it was rough. I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do? Marcus stared at the message. There was nothing Victoria could do. Nothing anyone could do except wait and hope the new medication worked better than the old one. Just keep being you. That's enough. That's not enough. I want to help. You already do. Every day. There was a long pause before her next message. The architect meeting went well. She has some ideas for making the space more flexible. I'll show you the sketches tomorrow. I might not make it to the cafe tomorrow. Need to stay with Jamie. Then I'll come to you. What's your address? Marcus hesitated. His apartment was nothing like Victoria's. It was cramped and cluttered and the heat barely worked. But she was asking, and he was tired of pretending his life was anything other than what it was. He sent the address. I'll bring lunch. And those sketches. And maybe Jamie would like to see them too. She'd love that. The next day, Victoria showed up at noon carrying bags of Chinese food and a folder of architect's drawings. Jamie was feeling better. The new medication seemed to be working, and her whole face lit up when she saw Victoria at the door. "You came," Jamie said. "Of course I came. I brought lo mein and drawings of a building. Want to see?" They spread the sketches out on the coffee table, and Victoria walked them through the architect's vision. Jamie asked a million questions, most of them about whether there would be dinosaurs anywhere in the building, and Victoria answered every single one seriously. "We could do a dinosaur mural in the kids' area," Victoria said. "What kind of dinosaur should it be?" "Ankylosaurus," Jamie said immediately, "with armor plates and a club tail." "Perfect. I'll tell the architect." Marcus watched them together, Victoria and Jamie, and felt something in his chest expand to the point of almost hurting. This woman who could have anyone, do anything, was sitting on his worn-out couch, eating Chinese food with his daughter, and talking about dinosaur murals like it was the most important conversation in the world. After lunch, Jamie went to her room to draw, and Marcus and Victoria sat in the small living room with the sketches spread between them. "Your place is nice," Victoria said. "You don't have to lie." "I'm not lying. It's warm. It's lived in. It's home." Marcus looked around at the apartment he'd been embarrassed by for so long. The furniture that didn't match, the toys scattered in corners, the stack of bills he still hadn't opened on the kitchen counter. "It's not much," he said. "It's enough." Victoria reached over and took his hand. "You've built a good life here, Marcus, with Jamie, against impossible odds. That's worth more than any fancy apartment." Marcus's throat felt tight. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too." They sat there in the afternoon light, hands linked, not needing to say anything else. Jamie's voice drifted from the bedroom, singing some song about dinosaurs. The radiator clanked and hissed. Outside, the city moved on with its business of existing. And for the first time since his wife left, Marcus felt like maybe he had a home that was more than just a place to survive. Maybe he had a home that was worth living for. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said after a while. Marcus's heart stuttered. "Okay." "I'm scared of what's happening between us." "Yeah, me too. But I don't want to stop. I don't want to go back to before when I was just existing. You make me want things again, want to build things and take risks and actually live instead of just getting through the day." Marcus squeezed her hand. "You do the same for me. So what do we do about it?" "I don't know. Keep showing up, I guess. Keep being honest. Keep figuring it out one day at a time." Victoria smiled. "That's a terrible plan." "You have a better one?" "No, but at least we're terrible at planning together." Jamie appeared in the doorway, holding a drawing of what appeared to be an ankylosaurus wearing a hard hat. "This is for the building," she announced, "so the dinosaur can help build it." Victoria accepted the drawing like it was the Mona Lisa. "This is perfect. Can I keep it?" "Yeah, but you have to put it in the building when it's done." "Deal." They spent the rest of the afternoon together, the three of them, and it felt easy in a way Marcus hadn't experienced in years. Victoria and Jamie making up stories about the construction dinosaur. Marcus making terrible jokes that made them both groan. The kind of ordinary, comfortable afternoon that only felt extraordinary when you'd been without it for too long. When Victoria finally left, Jamie turned to Marcus with a knowing look. "You really like her," she said. "Yeah, I really do." "Good. I like her too, and she likes you back." "How do you know?" "Because she looks at you the way you look at her, like the other person makes everything better." Marcus pulled Jamie into a hug, this small person who somehow understood things better than most adults. "When did you get so smart?" he asked. "I've always been smart. You just weren't paying attention." That night, after Jamie was asleep, Marcus sat on the couch with Victoria's contract in his hands. His start date was in 3 days. 3 days until his life changed completely. 3 days until he stopped just surviving and started actually building something. His phone buzzed. "Thank you for today, for letting me into your home, your life. It meant more than I can say. Thank you for coming, for seeing us. All of us, mess included. I like the mess. It's real. Good. Because there's a lot more where that came from. I'm counting on it." Marcus set down his phone and looked around his small apartment, at the toys and the bills and the life he'd built from nothing. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close, but it was his, and it was real, and for the first time in years, it felt like enough. More than enough, actually. It felt like home. Marcus's first day at the foundation started with him showing up 20 minutes early because he was too nervous to wait at home any longer. The church was still mostly empty, still under construction, but there was a small office set up in what used to be a storage room. Victoria was already there, of course, surrounded by blueprints and coffee cups. "You're early," she said, looking up from her laptop. "Couldn't sleep." "Me neither." She gestured to the desk across from hers. "That's yours. I know it's not much yet, but once construction's done, we'll have proper offices upstairs." Marcus set down his bag and looked at the desk. His desk. At a real job with a real salary doing work that actually mattered. It felt surreal. "What do I do first?" he asked. Victoria handed him a thick folder. "Read through these program proposals. Tell me which ones feel authentic and which ones feel like someone checked boxes without actually thinking about real people." Marcus spent the morning reading, making notes, occasionally asking Victoria questions that she answered without making him feel stupid for asking. By lunch, he had opinions about therapeutic horseback riding programs and art therapy initiatives and support groups for families. "The horseback riding thing is beautiful in theory," he said, "but it's not accessible for people with severe mobility issues, and it's expensive to maintain. We'd be better off focusing on things more people can actually participate in." Victoria nodded, making notes. "What about the art therapy?" "I like it, but the proposal reads like it was written by someone who's never actually struggled. All this language about finding inner peace through creative expression. That's not how it works when you're drowning. You don't need inner peace. You need someone to just hand you some paint and let you make a mess without judging. So we rewrite it. Yeah, make it less precious, more real." They worked through lunch, barely noticing when the construction crew showed up and started hammering in the main space. Victoria was different here, Marcus noticed. Still her, but sharper somehow. More focused. This was where she came alive. Around 3, she looked up from her laptop and rubbed her eyes. "I need a break before my brain melts. Want to walk through the space?" They wandered through the construction zone, Victoria pointing out where different rooms would be, Marcus imagining them filled with people. Real people with real problems who might actually find help here. "The garden should be ready by spring," Victoria said, stopping at the back door. "I want it to be the kind of place where someone can just sit and breathe without anyone asking them what's wrong." "That's good. People need that. Did you need that?" Marcus thought about the cafe table where they'd met, about sitting there alone, drowning in bills and hopelessness, just needing somewhere to exist for an hour. "Yeah," he said, "I really did." Victoria reached out and took his hand, and they stood there looking at what would become a garden, imagining it full of life. "I'm glad you're here," she said, "doing this with me. I couldn't do it alone." "Yeah, you could, but I'm glad you don't have to." They went back to work, and the afternoon disappeared into program budgets and staffing plans and 1,000 small decisions that would add up to something meaningful. When Marcus finally looked at the clock, it was almost 6. "I need to pick up Jamie," he said. "Go. I'll be here for a while longer." "You should go home too. Get some rest." Victoria smiled tiredly. "I will, eventually." But when Marcus came back the next morning, she was wearing the same clothes, and there were twice as many coffee cups on her desk. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked. "A little. Maybe. I don't remember." "Victoria, I know. I'm terrible at taking care of myself, but I was on a roll and I didn't want to lose momentum." Marcus took the coffee cup out of her hand. "You're going home, now, to sleep." "I can't. We have the contractor meeting at 10 and the designer coming at noon, and I'll handle the contractor meeting. You go sleep." "You don't know enough about the technical stuff." "Then I'll learn, or I'll call you if there's something I can't figure out. But you're not doing anyone any good if you collapse from exhaustion." Victoria looked like she was going to argue, but then her shoulders sagged. "Okay, but if the contractor tries to upsell us on anything, call me immediately." "Deal." She gathered her things and Marcus watched her leave, moving slowly, exhaustion written in every line of her body. He understood the impulse to work until you dropped, understood the fear that if you stopped moving, everything would fall apart, but someone needed to make sure she didn't burn out before they even opened the doors. The contractor meeting went fine. Marcus took notes on everything he didn't understand and promised to get back to him. The designer meeting was more complicated. She had ideas about color schemes and layouts that sounded beautiful, but felt wrong somehow. Too sterile, too much like a hospital. What if we used warmer colors, Marcus suggested, instead of all this white and gray, something that feels more like a home? The designer frowned. White is calming. Clinical studies show, with respect, I don't care what clinical studies show. This isn't a clinic, it's supposed to be a sanctuary. The designer looked taken aback, but she made notes, and by the time she left, they'd agreed on earth tones and natural materials and spaces that felt lived in instead of sterile. Victoria called at 4. How did it go? She asked, her voice rough with sleep. Good. The contractor's on schedule. The designer and I disagreed about pretty much everything, but I think we found a compromise. You disagreed with her? Yeah, was I not supposed to? Victoria laughed. No, you absolutely were supposed to. That's exactly why I hired you. How do you feel? Terrified. Like I have no idea what I'm doing. Perfect. That means you're doing it right. The weeks blurred together after that. Marcus falling into a rhythm of mornings at the cafe with Victoria, days at the construction site, evenings with Jamie. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and more than once he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake taking this job. But then he'd see the space taking shape, walls going up, windows being installed, the garden plot being prepared for spring planting, and he'd remember why this mattered. Victoria was relentless. She met with potential staff members and donors and city officials. She revised budgets and timelines and program proposals. She barely slept and forgot to eat and pushed herself to the point where Marcus had to physically take her laptop away and force her to take breaks. You're going to make yourself sick, he said one afternoon when he found her in the office at 7 p.m., still working. I'm fine. You're not fine. When did you last eat? Victoria waved a hand vaguely. Lunch, maybe. It's 7. That's not lunch, that's starvation. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'm ordering food. What do you want? I'm not hungry. I don't care, you're eating anyway. They ate Thai food in the construction zone, sitting on paint buckets because there weren't any chairs yet, and Victoria admitted she'd forgotten to take her pain medication that morning. The nerve pain's been bad this week, she said quietly, but I didn't want to slow down. We're so close to opening, and there's still so much to do. The foundation will still be here tomorrow. You need to take care of yourself. I know. I'm scared if I stop moving, I'll realize how terrified I am of all this. Marcus set down his food. What are you scared of? Everything. That nobody will come. That people will come and we won't be able to help them. That I've built this whole thing based on what I needed 3 years ago and it won't work for anyone else. She looked at him with eyes that were too bright. That I'll fail and prove everyone right who said I should have just stuck with running the company. Who said that? My board. My investors. My father, before he stopped speaking to me entirely. Victoria laughed bitterly. He thinks I'm throwing away my life on a vanity project, that I should focus on making money instead of wasting it on people who can't help themselves. Marcus felt anger flash hot in his chest. Your father's an idiot. He's a successful businessman. He's still an idiot. This isn't a vanity project. This is the most important thing you've ever done. How do you know? Because I've watched you for 4 months now. I've seen you light up when you talk about this in a way you never did when you talked about the company. I've seen you stay up all night working on program designs. I've seen you cry over paint samples because you wanted to get the color exactly right. He moved closer. This matters to you in a way that money never could. That's not vanity. That's purpose. Victoria's face crumpled and she started crying, really crying, and Marcus pulled her close and let her sob into his shoulder about her father and her fears and the weight of trying to build something perfect when nothing in life was ever perfect. I don't know if I can do this, she said when she could finally speak. You don't have to do it alone. That's what I'm here for. That's what the staff we're hiring is for. That's what this whole thing is about. Nobody doing it alone. She pulled back and wiped her eyes. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just stubborn and tired of watching people I care about destroy themselves trying to be perfect. People you care about, huh? Yeah. Specifically, you. Victoria smiled through her tears. I care about you too, in case that wasn't obvious. It wasn't. You're kind of hard to read sometimes. So are you. They sat there in the construction zone, surrounded by sawdust and half-finished walls, and Marcus realized they'd crossed some invisible line. They weren't just colleagues anymore, weren't just friends. They were something else, something neither of them had words for yet. We should probably talk about this, Victoria said. Probably. But I'm too tired to have that conversation coherently. Fair enough. Rain check? Rain check. Marcus drove her home that night, made sure she actually took her medication and ate something more substantial than Thai food, and left only after she promised to sleep for at least 8 hours. When he got home, Jamie was already in bed, and Mrs. Chen was folding laundry in his living room because apparently that's what she did when she was bored. "You look happy," she said. "I am happy. I think." "Good. You deserve it." She handed him a stack of Jamie's shirts. "That woman, Victoria, she's good for you." It's not like that." Mrs. Chen gave him a look that said she wasn't buying it. "Whatever you say, but I've known you for 3 years and I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at her." After Mrs. Chen left, Marcus lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about Victoria, about the way she'd cried in his arms, about the way she looked when she was working on something she believed in, about the fact that somewhere along the way he'd fallen completely, irreversibly in love with her. It was terrifying. It was also the most right thing he'd felt in years. His phone buzzed, a text from Victoria. "Thank you for tonight, for taking care of me, for not letting me spiral. Anytime. I meant what I said, about caring about you. I know, I meant it too. This is scary." "Yeah, but maybe scary's good, maybe. Get some sleep, Victoria. You too, Marcus." He fell asleep with his phone still in his hand, and for once, he didn't dream about drowning. The foundation opened on a Tuesday in late March. The garden wasn't finished yet. Spring was coming late that year, but everything else was ready. The rooms were painted in warm earth tones. The furniture was comfortable but not institutional. Jamie's ankylosaurus drawing hung framed in the children's area, right next to a mural of dinosaurs in hard hats. Victoria was a nervous wreck all morning, checking and rechecking everything, adjusting picture frames, making sure the coffee in the community kitchen was fresh. "What if nobody comes?" she asked Marcus for the 10th time. "Then we try again tomorrow, and the day after that, however long it takes." The first person showed up at 9:15. A woman in her 50s using a walker, looking uncertain and scared. Victoria greeted her at the door, and Marcus watched something shift in both of them. The woman relaxed. Victoria found her footing. By noon, there were 12 people there. By 3, 25. Some stayed for an hour, some for 10 minutes. Some came to the support groups Victoria had organized. Some just sat in the quiet rooms and breathed. Marcus spent the day helping where he was needed, answering questions, making sure people felt welcome. And he watched Victoria move through the space she'd built, talking to people, listening to their stories, being exactly the kind of present and compassionate that made people feel seen. When the last person left at 7, Victoria collapsed into a chair in the main room and started laughing. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it. You did it. No, we did it. I couldn't have done this without you." Marcus sat beside her, both of them exhausted and exhilarated and relieved. "What now?" he asked. "Now we do it again tomorrow. And the day after that. We keep showing up until this place is exactly what it's supposed to be." "What's it supposed to be?" Victoria thought for a moment. "A place where people don't have to pretend, where they can be messy and scared and imperfect, and that's okay, where someone sees them and doesn't look away." "Like the cafe," Marcus said. "Yeah, exactly like the cafe." They sat there in the quiet space, and Marcus realized that this, all of it, had started because a woman with crutches had asked if she could share his table, because 2 people who were drowning had found each other and decided to stop drowning alone. "Can I tell you something?" Victoria asked. "Always? I'm in love with you. I know that's probably terrible timing, and we work together and it's complicated, but I needed you to know." Marcus's heart stopped, then started again, faster. "That's not terrible timing," he said. "That's perfect timing." "Yeah? Yeah, because I'm in love with you too." Victoria turned to look at him, and her eyes were bright with tears again, but good tears this time. "Really? Really? Have been for a while now. I was just too scared to say it." "What changed?" Marcus thought about it. About the months of showing up at the cafe. About hospital rooms and construction sites and Thai food and paint buckets. About learning to ask for help and admitting when things were hard and building something beautiful from broken pieces. I stopped being scared of falling, he said, because I realized I already had. Victoria kissed him then, soft and tentative and perfect, and Marcus felt something in his chest unlock. Something that had been closed for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to be open. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria was smiling. "What do we do now?" she asked. "I don't know. Take it one day at a time, I guess. Keep showing up, keep being honest, keep figuring it out together." "That's a terrible plan. It's the only plan I've got." "Good enough for me." They left the foundation together, locking up the church that was now a sanctuary, and walked out into the Chicago evening. The air still had winter's bite, but spring was coming. Marcus could feel it. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Jamie wants to know if Victoria can come for dinner tomorrow. I told her to ask you herself, but she's too shy." Marcus showed Victoria the message. "My neighbor's a terrible liar. Jamie's never been shy a day in her life." "I'd love to come to dinner," Victoria said. "Fair warning, Jamie's going to ask you approximately 700 questions about dinosaurs and buildings and whether you're going to marry her dad." "What should I tell her?" "About the dinosaurs and buildings?" "About marrying her dad." Marcus stopped walking. "What would you tell her?" Victoria took his hand. "I'd tell her that I don't know what the future holds, that your dad and I are figuring things out one day at a time, but that I care about both of you very much and I'm not going anywhere." "That's a good answer." "Yeah? Yeah, it's honest. Jamie appreciates honest." They walked the rest of the way to Marcus's car and he drove Victoria home, and they sat in front of her building for 20 minutes just talking about nothing important. About the foundation's first day and what worked and what needed adjusting. About Jamie's latest dinosaur obsession. About the fact that the cafe's coffee was still terrible, but they should probably go back anyway because it felt wrong not to. "Same time tomorrow?" Victoria asked. "Always." She kissed him goodbye, and Marcus drove home feeling lighter than he had in years, maybe ever. Jamie was waiting up when he got home, pretending to do homework, but obviously just waiting to interrogate him. "Did you ask her about dinner?" she demanded. "Mrs. Chen texted me, kiddo. Your spy network needs work." "So is she coming?" "Yes, she's coming to dinner tomorrow." Jamie grinned. "Good. I like her. She makes you smile." "She does." "Are you going to marry her?" Marcus sat down next to Jamie on the couch. "I don't know. Maybe someday. We're still figuring things out." "But you love her." It wasn't a question, but Marcus answered anyway. "Yeah, I love her." "Does she love you back?" "She says she does." Jamie nodded seriously. "Then you should probably marry her eventually, but not until I'm ready to be a flower girl. I have standards." Marcus laughed and pulled her into a hug. "Noted. I'll make sure to consult you before making any major life decisions." "Good. That's how it should be." That night, Marcus lay in bed and thought about the future. Not in the abstract, terrifying way he had for the past 2 years, but in actual, concrete terms. The foundation growing and helping more people. Jamie getting older and healthier. Victoria by his side building something beautiful together. It wasn't perfect. There would be hard days and complications and moments where everything felt impossible, but for the first time, Marcus could see a path forward that didn't just involve surviving. He could see a life worth living. 3 months later, the foundation had served over 300 people. Victoria had hired a full staff, and Marcus was training 2 assistants to help with community outreach. Jamie's asthma was better controlled, and she'd made friends with a girl at the foundation whose mom used a wheelchair. The garden had bloomed exactly the way Victoria had imagined, full of native plants and quiet spaces and benches where people could sit and just exist. Marcus still went to the cafe sometimes, sitting at their old table, remembering the man he'd been before Victoria asked to share it. That man had felt invisible and hopeless, and convinced his life was just an endless cycle of failing. He didn't feel that way anymore. One Saturday in June, Marcus packed a picnic basket and drove Victoria and Jamie 2 hours outside the city to a state park where the light pollution was minimal and the stars were actually visible. They spread out a blanket in a clearing, and as the sun set and darkness crept in, the sky began to fill with stars. More stars than Marcus had ever seen, a whole universe of light that made everything else feel small and manageable. "It's beautiful," Victoria whispered. "Yeah," Marcus said, "it really is." Jamie had fallen asleep between them, exhausted from hiking all afternoon. Marcus reached over her and took Victoria's hand. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For sitting at my table that day. For seeing me when I felt invisible. For building something beautiful and letting me be part of it." He paused. "For loving me even though I'm a mess." Victoria squeezed his hand. "We're both messes, but we're messes together. That's what matters." They lay there under the stars, and Marcus thought about how strange life was. How one small moment, a woman asking to share a table in a crowded cafe, could change everything. How sometimes the things that saved you were the things you never saw coming. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." Up above them, the stars wheeled slowly across the sky, indifferent to human struggles and triumphs. But here on the ground, wrapped in a blanket with his daughter and the woman he loved, Marcus felt something close to peace. Not perfect peace, not the kind where everything was fixed and nothing hurt, but the kind where you knew that whatever came next, you wouldn't have to face it alone. And maybe that was the whole point. Years later, when people asked Victoria about the foundation and how it started, she never talked about the money or the planning or the board meetings. She talked about a cafe table and a man who'd been struggling just as much as she had. About two people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment and decided to stop drowning alone. She talked about how sometimes the smallest acts, offering a seat to a stranger, showing up when it's hard, being honest about the mess, could quietly transform two lives forever. And every time she told the story, she'd look at Marcus and smile. And he'd know exactly what she was thinking, that they'd both been lost when they met, that they'd found each other anyway, and that sometimes, against all odds and expectations and logic, that was enough to build a whole new world. The foundation grew over the years, expanding to serve thousands. Jamie grew up surrounded by people who'd learned that being different didn't mean being broken. Marcus and Victoria built a life together that was messy and real and full of the kind of love that came from truly seeing another person. But the cafe table stayed the same. Marcus still went there sometimes, usually on Tuesday mornings when he needed to think or remember or just exist for a while. Sometimes Victoria joined him. Sometimes Jamie did. Sometimes it was just Marcus and his coffee and the memory of a gray November day when everything had changed. The waitress who'd watched their whole story unfold would bring Earl Grey without being asked and never commented on the fact that they still sat at the same cracked vinyl booth. Because some places were sacred, not because of what they were, but because of what happened there. And that cafe table, that ordinary, nothing special table in a crowded Chicago cafe, had quietly witnessed two lives reshaping each other, had held space for hope when hope seemed impossible, had been the place where two people learned that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was simply show up and be honest about the mess. Marcus would sit there and think about how far he'd come, about the man he'd been, exhausted and invisible and convinced he was failing at everything, about the woman with crutches who'd seen him anyway, about the life they'd built from that single moment of connection. And he'd finish his terrible coffee and go back to his beautiful, messy life, grateful for every imperfect moment of it. Because in the end, that's what saved them both. Not perfection, not having all the answers, not fixing everything that was broken. Just showing up, just being seen, just refusing to drown alone. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything.